is the Forge Audio Network, your official source for all things Forge FC. Here's your host, Anthony Urciuoli.
Hey now, Forge faithful, Anthony Urciuoli back with you. It is part 2 of the 2022 Forge FC season in review. This is the middle third, so we have to focus on the midfield, and we will. Alex Gangué-Ruzic, soccer analyst with CamPL.ca, also One Soccer. He will join us. We'll break down, we'll review the Forge midfield and look ahead to next season. Some key pieces returning for Forge FC. We'll get into that. The middle third of the season was a big one. Kyle Becker, the first CPL player, speaking of midfield, Kyle Becker, the first player in CPL history to hit 100 matches. We'll talk about that. Also, we're going to talk about the Spark Summit, which was a hugely successful Forge. So proud of being on the front foot of this, celebrating women in sports, in business, and it was all done at Tim Hortons Field. We will recap and bring you back to the Spark Summit, Forge FC leading the way as far as the Canadian Premier League goes and inclusivity in women in sports. So we'll break that down as well. Now, if we're going to talk Kyle Becker, we do have to mention he was honored playing in his 100 matches. The presentation with the jersey, the crowd, it was a phenomenal day for Kyle and his family and for the fans at Tim Hortons Field. And during that, just days later, Forge would start their 6-game winning streak. Now, this winning streak was so impressive for many different reasons, but Forge outscored their opponents 17-3 in those 6 matches. It was unbelievable. One of those 15 goals came from the captain, Kyle Becker, from the corner. The Becker Olympico goal was on July 19th in a 5-1 win over Edmonton at Tim Hortons Field. Here's One Soccer with the call.
4 Forge players by the spot break. Becker! Is that an Olympico? Kyle Becker gets it done from the corner again! 4 first-half goals from Forge.
I mean, that's just that was just how things were going for Forge at the time. They could do no wrong, scoring from just about everywhere. Just to recap that winning streak: a 2-0 win over York, 5-1 win over Edmonton, 3-1 over Valor, 2-1 over Cavalry, 4-0 win over Ottawa, and then they would win 1-0 at Halifax before the streak was snapped at Cavalry. But 6-match winning streak really went a long way. It padded the lead. The goal differential was just, Forge, when you compared the goal differential, Forge FC finished the season with a goal differential of plus 22. Now, just by comparison, the second best goal differential was from Ottawa at plus 7. Plus 7, plus 22. That was the difference. And that final, where Forge, by the way, in case you need any reminder, I haven't mentioned it yet in this episode, but your reigning, defending, undisputed CPL champions, Forge FC, for the third time in 4 seasons, 4 straight CPL final appearances. The league's only been around for 4 years. So that final between Forge, Ottawa, with Forge winning 2-0. Despite Forge finishing with 2 less points than Ottawa on the final table, that plus 22 goal differential really told the story. And that 6-match winning streak went a long way in just padding the points, padding the stats, and putting Forge in good position down the stretch. Even when things weren't going well, they had banked enough and built up enough during that stretch to really keep them going, even when things weren't going so well. The benefits of that winning streak kind of lived on later in the year. Also in the the middle third of the 2022 Forge FC season, Forge's takeover in the park. Now, I was lucky enough to be a part of one of these. By the way, did you know Soupy? I think I've said Soupy is a Hamilton thing. Like it doesn't exist anywhere outside of Hamilton. That blew my mind that it was just a Hamilton thing. But as part of the summer Soupy in the park, Forge did a bit of a takeover. When I was there, Taryn Campbell was there, Alessandro Hojab-Rapport. They were playing with the kids, playing soccer, playing games, playing tag, just having fun with the kids. Here is some of what you, in case you missed it, here's some of what went down when Forge took over the Soupy in the Park fun here at Powell Park in downtown Hamilton. And this is Faith, who is collaborating with Forge FC on behalf of the city for the Soupy program. Faith, you told me this earlier, blew my mind. Soupy is a Hamilton-only thing. I had no idea.
Well, the Soupy program in Hamilton is one of our oldest programs. We've actually been around since 1909. We celebrated 110 years recently. But the Soupy program is a free drop-in program across all the parks in Hamilton, or as many as we can, where kids can come for the day, play crafts, hang out with friends, do activities, all kinds of games like we have back here.
And several Forge players have taken part in this pop-up program. Sebastian Costello, Chris Colongo in Waterdown, and at Powell Park it was Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic and Taryn Campbell. How great is it?
This is phenomenal, having local athletes come out. Their field is right down from us. It's really probably very inspiring for all the kids in this neighborhood, just to see what could potentially happen, and having like the opportunity to play around here. It's amazing. Yeah.
So Taryn Campbell, Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic, and the kids took part in, they played monkey in the middle with the ball. They played kind of this capture the flag type game. And then they split the kids up and went head-to-head, Ali versus T, for all the soccer glory, all the Soupy soccer glory. And it was Gangué-Ruzic, who, by the way, his kids named their club the Rainbow Warriors, which is lovely. I mean, it represents love, but also that competitiveness. T's players went with the name Blue Demons. So clearly two different mindsets. But in the end, it came down to sudden death, golden goal, and it was Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic Rainbow Warriors that came out on top. Taryn, how do you recover from this devastating loss this afternoon?
Yeah, a bad day to be a blue demon team, on the Blue Demon team, but we'll be better next week. Yeah, it's nice to spend time and give back to the community. Some of these kids, I think they've been to a couple Forge games, so it's nice to get back to them.
All right, Ali, you are the victor. You and your Rainbow Warriors. You know, these kids, not only do they get to play with Forge players, but they're also getting ticket vouchers. So maybe kids who wouldn't be able to see a Forge game now can. How important are initiatives like this, not just for the club and the organization, but also just for the neighborhood and for the community?
It was really fun. It was almost as intense as the weekends. Yeah, it's fun to come out here with the community, see some of the people that live around us and that are supporting us from inside the stadium and from afar as well. Yeah, I think it just shows you like a bigger picture of what you're doing. You know, you're not just playing soccer. You know, there's a lot of people that care about the team, care about the club and the community. So that's what you see from coming to these.
You know, that's one thing, not just Forge, but I mean the clubs all around the league missed was during those COVID years, they couldn't get out there into the community and do some of that, just do some of that outreach stuff and just hang out with fans, kids, just have a presence in the community, which Forge does so well, but they weren't able to for a couple of years. This year, though, they were back at it, and not only the club, but the public reaped those benefits with the park takeover, with with the skills clinics, and with the Spark Summit. It was a huge success, and Forge so proud to be on the front foot of this. In case you missed it, let's take you back to the first ever Spark Summit celebrating women in sports and in business. A very important event was held and hosted by Forge prior to their clash with Pacific FC. Now, it was the Women in Sports match, so it's only fitting that the first ever Spark Summit was held at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. Now, the event included a panel of women from professional athletes, front office executives, and sports media personalities speaking about their experiences navigating the world of sports. There was a Q&A session. There's a panel discussion on gender equity in sports business leadership. And, maybe most importantly, at least as important, it was one giant networking event for professional women. Now, I was very fortunate to be able to attend this event, and I can tell you something I learned and something that was spoken about was that men have a role to play in this as well, as far as being a part of the conversation and being supportive and being allies in what is still a very male-dominated world. The event was spearheaded by Forge FC Associate Vice President of Business Operations, Nicole Demers, who is the highest-ranking female executive in the Canadian Premier League. And she provided the opening remarks at the Spark Summit.
And on behalf of all of the Hamilton Sports Group, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you all for joining us here this evening and being a part of the conversation. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to our incredible group of panelists who will be meeting here shortly. And we're excited to have you here in Hamilton at Tim Hortons Field.
Now, the event was hosted by Jacqueline Dory of CBC Sports. Panelists included Deirdre Dion, Olympic medalist and sports media executive, Andy Petrillo, sports broadcaster, and Taylor McIntyre, football coach at McMaster University. Our own Jessica Lisi covered the event, and she was able to sit down and have a chat with Andy Petrillo.
Okay, Andy, just want your general thoughts on the Spark Summit today. You know, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, I think it's really special that, Forge FC, Hamilton Ticats have come together and just created this summit because there is a want for it. There's a need for it, as proof by the amount of people who were there, right? There's definitely a call by women to continue listening to the stories of women in the industry, women who are continuing to look for allies, who are continuing to look for teammates, to use the sports cliche, where we all just really want to stick together and help one another out. So I think it's really special when you see these types of summits. You wonder, have they kind of like had their day? No, right? At the end of the day, women continue to want to network and hear each other's stories and help each other out. So I think it's really special. And, congratulations on a successful year one.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you could hope for one takeaway from all those women that were watching you up there, what would it be?
I really want them to take away that we are here for one another. And I know it was addressed in the summit that in the past there really has been this token mentality with women because we've had to work so hard to be in, what is described as a male-dominated industry, and that when you make it, when you've gone through the gauntlet, you feel very protective of your spot, and when you see another, woman coming on board, you don't want to help her out. And I really hope that what we've at least shared here tonight is that mentality is changing, and thank goodness it's changing, because however are we going to see women advance in the sports industry if we don't help one another? And and Deidre also brought up a great point where she said, just because I had to struggle and suffer, why do you have to struggle and suffer? It should be my job to at least help make it easier for you. And I thought that was pretty powerful, and I hope that's the main takeaway, is that women are here for one another and that we really do want to see one another succeed.
The Spark Summit was a huge success that provided many takeaways for the women in attendance. Jessica Lisi sat down with one of those women, Danielle.
Okay, Daniela, I just have a couple questions for you. Obviously, you attended the Spark Summit, a super exciting event. So what were your overall thoughts on it?
Overall, I think that a lot of the women, I think that they all had very good things to say, just about being a woman and taking up space in male-dominated fields. I think the biggest takeaway was just being your biggest advocate, and that nobody else is going to advocate for yourself. You're going to have to really push yourself to, even just being a woman in a field like this, you're going to have to push yourself, step outside of your boundaries, and really just take any opportunity that's given to you.
Forge FC so proud to be on the front foot of the Women in Sports match and the Spark Summit. It was a lot of fun off the field and on the field as well, because that night Forge scored a 1-0 win over Halifax, and that actually capped off their 6-match winning streak. So it was a good night all around for Forge and for the community as a whole. Now, let us delve deeper into the middle third. Joining us, Alex Gangué-Ruzic, soccer analyst for CanPL.ca, also won soccer. And here is part one. We talked about the defense, the back line, including the keeper. Now we focus on the midfield. What do you think about Becker's season this year and maybe his future going forward?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it was an interesting one. Maybe he didn't get the goals or assists we're used to seeing from Kyle Becker. So maybe you look at that and be like, okay, maybe he struggled a bit, but far from it. I think it's an example. It was just the season that Forge had. He was one of the constant lights. And when you have some younger guys around you, you have some guys who are, thrust into roles they're maybe not so familiar with. You could tell he really bought into to being more of a true number 8. I think in past years you looked, he'd kind of end up being a number 10. He's always going to give you work rate defensively, but he'd more be like, okay, I know that I can maybe get away with a few things. I have Achinioti Janssen behind me. I have some other guys behind me. You could kind of see that in past years, and he'd push higher up the field, and he'd always be in the final third. But I think this year he really realized that, okay, gotta be more of a number 8. This is a young team. It got to be a presence in the middle of the park. And I think it's Kyle Becker. He's such a well-rounded player. I mean, we already see it with his 2 feet, how good he is with the right and the left. He's comfortable going in the attack. He's, aggressive defensively, sometimes maybe too much so, but that's always the flip of the coin you get with him. You don't want to rein in that aggression because it usually helps him play at his best. So he always has those tools, but I think it was a very mature season, which is what you want from your captain and someone who's, in his early 30s on a young team. He was, maybe didn't get the goals or assists, but I think it ended up helping Forge overall just because of all the turnover that he had. Because, yeah, definitely in the past seasons, he was a bit more freewheeling, and he got away with it. And it worked. It helped the team. It gave them a little more oomph in attack. But now, arguably, they had so much oomph in attack, he wasn't even needed. That's the one thing that's also worth noting. We'll get to the attackers in a second, I'm sure, but you look at the depth there was in attack. He didn't need to be the guy in attack like he was in the first year, and that also helped that discussion that, okay, he can go back and you can tell he was committed to winning.
Yeah, and you mentioned the aggression, and it's true. Without that, then he's not Kyle Becker. I mean that's what makes Becker. So you kind of have to take both sides of it. And there have been a lot of comparisons with Becker and Noah Jensen. In Becker's case, he did. The numbers weren't staggering, but when you look at when those goals came and when those assists came, whether it was an Olympico from the corner or a goal at Calvary or a delivery in the semifinal against at Calvary, and he was just kind of there in the big moments, and that's kind of what Becker's been known for. Noah Jensen he looks like he's knocking on the doorstep, and he looks like a guy that could play regular minutes for almost any team in this league. Another guy that we didn't know much about coming into this year, first year as a pro. Everywhere he's played, he's been a captain, whether it was at Boston College. So he's a guy that looks like he's a different player than Becker in a lot of ways, but that leadership type quality, it looks like he has that, and that could be the next step for Noah Jensen if he remains with his club.
Yeah, he's going to be a fascinating prospect just because there's a lot of tools there. There's a lot of exciting tools. I think you see him come on. It was on his debut or one of his first games. He scores that worldie of a goal. Yeah. He's shown that he can ping a ball around. He can get in the final third. With the midfielder, it's all about just picking your moments, right? That's what you kind of saw with a lot of the other guys. They've really learned how to pick their moments, and I think that's going to be something that with more reps, he's going to kind of learn. Okay, when do I go up and get a shot, or when do I know when to drop back? When am I going to, how do I involve myself in the final third? How do I really, a lot of midfield work too that maybe doesn't get as seen as much as off the ball movement. Okay, where am I occupying? Where am I making defenders think about me? And I think that's the sort of stuff that's going to be exciting to grow, because I think he has a lot of those tools that you want out of midfield. There's some of that stuff you almost can't teach, the long shots, the passing. And from what the games I got to see him play, it's someone that you can see he's still putting it together. But once he does, it's going to be kind of like what Sissoko and what Hojiabapur did, where they also had tools, and then they really added this maturity, this refinement to his game. And I think the fact that Jensen is just in his first year, that's going to come with time, and it's going to be very exciting once he puts that whole package together.
Yeah, after the final, when I went to the dressing room and I waited for the champagne to finish because I don't want to get my hair wet, I guess. So I didn't bother. I waited kind of at the door for that to finish, but everyone's champagne and everyone's kind of partying, having fun, listening to music, and Noah Jensen's like stretching on the floor whenever. So it just not that one's right or one's wrong. It's just it's him. He's just there's a discipline there. There's a composure there. There's this maturity there that. I think the potential is very high for a guy like Noah Jensen. Tactically, though, this midfield, what do we usually they played with the three in the middle. It was kind of like a 4-3-3 type, mind you. And Bobby will tell you, once the ball's kicked, everyone those formations aren't exactly intact as you see them. But how would you maybe describe that midfield and the tactical responsibilities that come with it?
It's huge. I mean, 4-3-3, that's, the quintessential, okay, you want to dominate the midfield of some form. I mean, the Barcelona of the 2010s, they rocked the 4-3-3. A lot of the teams that were great in that, they typically had 3-man midfield. So it's all just about controlling play. I think that's really the aspect of it on both sides of the ball. I think on the ball, you have to be patient. And one thing that's nice with the 3-man midfield is you can create triangles. Sometimes maybe in a 2-man midfield, you're a little relied more on doing a lot more running, or maybe you have to dribble a guy to get the nice lane you want. Whereas if a 3-man midfield, if you can get it all clicking, you can kind of just be making these little runs into space. You make a pass, you form a triangle, and you're just forming triangles. So it's really about a lot of control on the ball through those small efficient movements. And then from there, it's very also important defensively because you can tighten things up and really make things uncomfortable for the team. So I think you want guys who are very solid on both areas of the ball, guys who can cover a lot of ground. And I think when you look at the fact that, Forge has, say, if you're looking at next year, everyone's returning, or even if you look at this year, the fact that they have Achinoti Janssen, Jensen, Becker, Hojabapur, Sissoko, all able to play in those roles. They have exactly the right prototypes, and it showed that how much they were able to really dominate midfield on both sides of the ball. And from there, it makes everything tick. Like the wingers are able to get service, the fullbacks are able to go forward, the center backs feel comfortable. A good midfield is a key to a 4-3-3, I'd even argue.
All right, talking middle of the pitch with Alex Gangué-Ruzic. That was part 2. We're going to check back in with Alex in part 3. Because we're going to be talking forwards. Plenty more to come. Subscribe wherever you get your Forge content, whether it's through podcast or YouTube. And make sure you check out and follow Forge on social media because plenty of content to be had there as well. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
The Forge Audio Network with Anthony Urciuoli. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.